This week, London Real meets UFC fighter Dan Hardy.
I'm not an athlete, I'm a fighter that's trying to be a martial artist.
His wins and his losses.
That's it, I'm done. I'm not enjoying it anymore. This is not fun for me anymore. I'm not getting anything out of it, I'm just getting damaged.
He talks the spirit world.
The thing is, like, ayahuasca doesn't necessarily do anything to change the person. It just helps the person understand who they are.
And introduces the wolf heart.
They want to feed the wires into my heart so they can measure the second heartbeat. So they can then burn it.
London Real presents Dan Hardy, Uncut.
Every subject's on the table, so feel free to ask away.
You mentioned Lorenzo Fertitta, which people don't know. He's one of the owners of the UFC, and he's been a big fan of yours for a long time. And I remember him tweeting out, I'm never going to cut Dan Hardy because I love that guy because he goes to war. And this was during your 4-fight losing streak, which was, I know, a tough time for you and a tough transition in the sport. I remember you mentioning that you had tweeted something in Las Vegas, like a picture, and someone tweeted back like, "Why aren't you working on your takedown defense?" And you were like really frustrated with that. And I was just wondering if you could talk us through that. I don't know, a dark period, or is it dark in retrospect?
It is. I mean, it's still dark, but I'm thankful for it. It was a weird time because to start with, I never saw myself losing my first fight. I saw myself going on a winning streak straight off, and so I lost my first fight, and that was immediately a reality check. But
your very first MMA fight?
Yeah,
we were talking about that earlier.
Yeah,
okay.
but once that was out of the way, my next thing was, I'm never going to lose more than a couple of fights in a row. It's just they're just things that I just expect of myself. So, I lost the title fight. I wasn't too hard on myself for that because I wasn't expected to win. I knew I was outmatched on the night, It was just one of those things. He had the experience and the money behind him and obviously the talent, as everybody knows. So,
and in a way, you said that's a win, kind of, because you went the 5 rounds. There wasn't that knockout. There wasn't that submission.
No. I didn't get beat up. I didn't get damaged in any way. But I also didn't put up any real fight. I just couldn't. I was outmatched. He's a better athlete and he's a better wrestler, and he used exactly what he needed to win the fight. And people will look back on GSP as a pivotal time in the sport where it shifted and an athlete started to take over. Because in 10 years' time, the sport's gonna be entirely different. And when we've got guys that are, guys that would normally leave college and sign with the NFL or the NBA, and they're coming over to the UFC, then we've got a whole bunch of monsters, and that changes. But I think GSP was one of the first ones. I'm not an athlete. I've always said that. I'm not an athlete. I'm a fighter that's trying to be a martial artist.
Okay. And GSP works on that explosive strength and all of that.
Yeah, and he's very linear in his approach to it as well. I mean, I've spent a couple of weeks up with him now, and see how he puts his team around him and how it's structured, and it's very direct, very linear. Did you
train with Phil Nurse?
I did. I didn't train with him. I was present while he was there, working with GSP. Really good coach.
Yeah. So he has a gym in New York, and my first ever martial arts experience was with him, just completely randomly by walking into his gym.
Nice.
But you can see the stuff that he does and how it translates through to GSP and John Jones in the actual fights. Those Superman punches followed by those sort of like rangy kicks to takedowns. I think he's quite an influential. Definitely. An influential guy in the scene.
And I think that because he doesn't spend the whole training camp with them as well, he'll like come in sporadically and give them a few nuggets of information and then leave. So they have them bouncing around the head, and I think it sinks in a bit better, because obviously in training camp it's so monotonous. You're in there for like 8-12 weeks and you're seeing the same faces every day. So when you get a different person with a different voice, sometimes I think you pick it up better.
And you say linear. What do you mean by linear? As in...
Well, he's very direct. He has, he's very good at following his game plan. He's very good at knowing what he needs to do to win the fight. And I'm. It's not that I don't want to win the fight. I'm just less interested in it. I'm more interested in fighting.
Okay.
Do you think there's a difference between New George and Old George in terms of
the
way his approach?
Definitely, but I think in his earlier days he had an aggression to get to the belt. he was, you know, he wasn't getting the respect that he's getting now, and obviously he wasn't getting the money. I mean, it's not, GSP's not a money guy. I thought he would be when I met him, and he's not. He just loves life, and money's there as a lubricant, basically. He just enjoys himself. But now he's respected as a successful and you know, an accomplished athlete. So now he's not really got that aggression that he used to fight with, you know.
And it's good to keep the belt, as we've seen recently with Anderson.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's doing his job.
There's something about keeping the belt that's kind of nice.
Yeah,
right? And he knows that.
Of course. I mean, it's always better to step away and hand the belt back and say, I'm done defending it now. You can give it to somebody else. But yeah, I think GSP's winding down. I think he has a couple more challenges for himself within the sport. But other than that, I think he's done.
Do you think he'll walk away before he gets beat?
I hope so.
Okay. So sorry, I hate to bring this, but back to your losing streak. So
no worries.
was it worse and worse and worse, or was there a whole transformation going on in your head at the time?
Yeah, it's so much change because so with the GSP fight, I wasn't too hard on myself. With the Condit fight, I knew I was going in there against a respected champion, but ego kind of got the better of me. We were just discussing this before we started recording. The problem was that after a title fight, the UFC generally give you quite a long gap before they schedule you another fight, to let you kind of decompress and wind down, and you know, and obviously recover if you need to. And there's usually a lot of promotional stuff to do after a title fight as well. Whether you win or lose, a lot of people are trying to get their hands on you depending on the performance. And I was quite in demand because they'd done the 3-part prime time. So I had loads and loads of people just coming up to me in the street being like, oh yeah, work on your takedown defense, and you're beating them up. And after like 3 or 4 months of this constant trickle of a little bit of wrestling, you'll be the champion, a little bit of wrestling, you'll be the champion, I came up against Condit and I was like, I'm going to run through this guy and then get to the title again. And I don't think it was quite that extreme, but that was where my ego was at the time. That was where my overconfidence was at. So in the Condit fight, it was just a case of waiting for me to land my left hook to knock him out. It's kind of how it felt when I walked in there. And I remember hitting him with a left hook, and I felt that it was a good punch. I felt that it might have hurt him. So then I think I threw like another 2 or 3 left hooks in a row, which is a schoolboy error. I mean, I was just showing him exactly what I was going to do. And because he's got, you know, Greg Jackson in his corner, who's a good analyst, they obviously looked at my fights and were thinking, okay, left hook counters. And he just got it perfectly in the split second before I landed it. And, you know, and after that, it was a real wake-up call, because then I realized that the thing that I thought I was good at, I could get beaten at as well, because that was my first knockout. I'd never really been outstruck before. I never really felt like I had. So then all of a sudden there's this urgency going into the next fight, like, okay, I'm 2 down now. 3 fights and you cut is generally the rule. And in my heart, I was hoping they were going to be more forgiving, because I'd fought GSP and Condit. You know, I mean, you know, I'm not fighting
number 1 and number 2.
Yeah, exactly. And then they gave me Anthony Johnson. I was like, I've got this monster to deal with now. and I remember seeing him like a couple of weeks before I got offered the fight against him at like a tap-out sign, and he was like 235.
Yeah, he looks like a linebacker for an NFL team.
He used to cut huge. Well, he's had problems cutting. Right?
Yeah,
he's fought at heavyweight now.
Yeah, broke Arlovsky's jaw.
Yeah.
So he was a beast, and you were like...
Well, so the problem was that
it was a lay and pray, basically.
Yeah, well, we had this conversation going back and forward on private message on Twitter, because we've been friends, and I always had this joke, you know, like every time I saw him, I'd make a joke about his weight, like are you still in my weight class, or something like that. And we were always quite good friends. We always got on, and so we had this kind of back and forth on Twitter, especially when Tito had pulled out and they brought in Phil Davis. We were like, okay, we're gonna steal the show. We want to make an impact to steal the show and have a war. And I was thinking, he's a big puncher. I've just been knocked out. He's thinking, okay, I'm gonna knock this guy out again. So I kind of put all my eggs in one basket and thought we're gonna have a brawl. And I was just gonna stay active and wear him out and wait for his weight cut to catch up with him, and then beat him up. That was my plan. Or even you know, catch a submission, because he kind of gives up when he gets tired, as far as like his takedown defense. And he just punked me. He nailed me. It was great. It was perfect, because he came out and he knew exactly what he was going to do. And I knew he cut weight hard, because I'd said a lot in the media about him not making weight, about me not expecting him to make weight. So then I was thinking that would put extra emphasis on him cutting the weight, and then he'd exhaust himself for the fight. This was my thinking behind it. This is how you deal with a guy that's far too big for the weight class.
Right.
And I'd seen him weight cut, and he cut weight Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night, and Friday morning.
In the sauna?
Yeah, sauna in. I had one guy tell me that they saw him laying in the elevator on the way back up to his room on like Wednesday night.
Jesus.
So I knew he was exhausted, and so I was thinking, okay, this is going to work out. I've got a good feeling about this. And then in the fight, there was a stumble. He knocked me with a good head kick. I was kind of off balance, and then when I got back to my feet, if I remember it right, he kind of rushed me with a takedown. I landed on my thumb and dislocated it. And then it took me a little while because I had to like kind of get my thumb moving and working again because I was working a lot of kimuras. That was one of my game plans if I was on the bottom. And he was just so strong. It was just twisting out of the kimura. And the problem was that then I'm on the bottom and I'm carrying like, he was 210, 214 on the night. So I'm like carrying a huge amount of weight and trying not to take too much damage. So then I was getting tired at the same time and I was just exhausted by the end of the first round. And it was just, and I just kind of, I think I just kind of gave up in my head.
Was it like watching a bad movie where you're like, this isn't happening, but this is happening?
Yeah, and I really didn't feel like I could do a great deal about it. And in the last round, there was a moment where I thought, I'm just going to go for it. And I think I just started throwing. And he engaged me for a second, but by that point, I had nothing left.
Okay. You talked about the media, like about getting in his face or making fun of him. I mean, you were notorious for getting kind of GSP riled up, and then you called Marcus Davies the fake Irishman, which, like in the U.S., they might be like, "What do you mean?" But like, we understand what you're talking about in the U.K. because there's Irish people, and then there's everyone in America who says they're Irish on St. Patrick's Day, and then they go back to being whatever they are normally. But I mean, how much of that is your game plan? Because you don't really seem like that guy. No. So is it all a fabrication? Is it something you plan on?
Yeah. Well, see, the thing is, fans have kind of a weird view of this. Like now, if I say yes, it's all fabrication, then they think I've like done them wrong in some way. But it's not. It's game plan. I'm fighting. As soon as I've signed the contract, I'm at war with this guy. So any way I can get inside his head and kind of like weaken him a little bit, I'll do it. And Marcus Davies is a very, very passionate Irishman. I mean, he wasn't born in Ireland, but obviously, he's got ancestry from there, and he's passionate about it. And I don't have a problem with that. People can claim whatever heritage they want. It makes no difference to me. But because I knew he was so passionate about it, I knew that it was going to be something that he would.
He bit on that one.
Yeah,
and it affected his performance.
It did. It made him more aggressive. And there are two different Marcus Davises. There's the Marcus Davis that comes to grapple, and the Marcus Davis that comes to strike. And if you watch him against someone like, was it Jay Tan he fought in Liverpool?
He beat Jess Leo down by a big knockout, but I think that was in Newcastle.
Was it? And he fought Jason Tan as well, one of Jason Tan's only fights in the UFC. And there was somebody else he fought. And you can tell that he shows up looking more like a boxer. He doesn't look quite as muscular. He looks leaner and smaller and quicker. And they're the fights he normally knocks people out. So, and I thought that obviously because I was known for not being a particularly good grappler, I thought that he would, again, invest in a grappling heavy takedown and show up looking very muscular and strong like he does when he's got a grappling game plan, which he did. So when I saw him at the weigh-ins, I was like, okay, it's worked. He's going to grapple, which in the first round he did. So there are different, like you can kind of, it's kind of like striking. Like if I'm standing in front of somebody and I've got a flat wall behind them, and I'm standing directly in front, they've got a 50-50 option of which way to go. If I step to my left, even an inch, immediately that side looks more enticing. So you can do that with fighters' game plans as well. I'm giving away all my tricks now, but I'm effectively retired, which I'm sure you're going to want to talk about.
It's funny you should say that.
No, I'm not. No, not at all. Anyway, so that was all I do. I just see how I can like influence their options a little bit.
Okay.
And so I can kind of play up the fact that I'm not a very good grappler, or talk about the fact that I want to stand and trade and have a war.
Right.
And
even though in secret you're training 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu and all that stuff.
I used it really well.
Your last fight, you were taking the guy down in like rounds 2 and 3, right?
Yeah, that surprised him. But I used it early days, Cage Warriors against Matt Thorpe. I was fighting him for the world title, first world title shot. I was so nervous, and Matt Thorpe's like 6'4", and he's good at everything. You know, he's a good grappler, he's a good striker, he's got good kicks and knees, and I was predominantly a striker, and I knew that they would bank on that. So I took him down for 5 rounds and just held on to him and beat him up, and I didn't do a great deal of damage, but I won the belt. But that was the same thing, because, like, you know.
But as soon as if you're known as a striker and you start taking people down,
yeah.
they think as soon as you shoot, they drop their hands, and then you can clock them. So it's just another string to your bow, right?
Yeah.
And it sows uncertainty in their mind.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 4th loss. How's your mentality, and what are you thinking now? Yeah.
Well, my approach, my mentality before the fight is more telling, really, because after the Anthony Johnson fight, I got back to the dressing room and I sat on the floor with my hand in a bucket of ice, and I looked at my striking coach Steve and I said, I'm done. I'm not enjoying it anymore. This is not fun for me anymore. I'm not getting anything out of it. I'm just getting damaged. So I was just like, I'm over it. And he said, like all coaches would, take some time, have a think about it. You know, let it settle in, let the swelling go down. But I'd already started planning for other things, like in my head, even before the Anthony Johnson fight, just to kind of stay relaxed in the fight. I was trying to think, if this doesn't go right, what are my other options? Because I'd never really thought about it before. I was going to be the UFC champ. That was the goal. That was the goal when I'd signed with the UFC. Not before the UFC. It was to be a UFC fighter. I had to kind of reconfigure my approach. But anyway. So I was done. I'd given up, and I'd already been looking at things that I was going to do after. I wanted to go back to university and study philosophy. I had a list of places that I wanted to travel, you know, different experiences that I wanted to have, and different things that I wanted to do, because mixed martial arts in general has been very, very productive for me, and it's given me a lot of good connections. I've met a lot of good people from it, but the actual sport of mixed martial arts is quite destructive. You know what I mean? And I'll be like listening to Simon and Garfunkel or walking around an art gallery, and I'm like, well, these people just created something that was powerful and beautiful, or a good book or whatever. And I felt that I kind of want to like
create
something
better. Destroy.
Yeah, leave something more of a contribution than, because the way I look at it is like this, and this was something that came up a lot when I was in Peru. There's no point to any of this.
Yeah.
You know, like the UFC, there's no point to it. And if you look at the champions, and this is by no means meant to be an insult to anybody, but they're all very linear in what they're doing. They don't think outside of the box, you know? They learn martial arts, they eat right, and they thank Jesus. And you know what I mean? And it's very much, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm doing. And in my head, I've always been kind of, oh, that over there and that over there. You know what I mean? So I've never been.
It's probably quite difficult to be a champion though if you're not intensely focused.
No doubt. So that's why I've kind of put it to one side. But
was the ayahuasca something planned before your 4th loss?
That was my treat after the Ludwig fight.
Right.
Regardless of how it went, I knew that the ayahuasca experience was going to help me with what came next, whether it was to continue fighting or to do something else.
Do you think the fact that you had actually already convinced yourself you were going to go on that journey helped you at peace at that fight? You know, helped you relax in that fight? That you had made a decision, I'm going to go?
I think so. And the thing was, I wasn't really fighting for myself then, because the title fight and all the fights up until the Lytle fight were for me. I wanted to win. You know, I wanted to be better and to be more successful. With the Lytle fight, I just wanted to fight. I wasn't even interested in winning. I didn't go in there with any real intention of winning. Obviously, I wanted to. There's no doubt. You always go into a fight wanting to, but I wasn't making the decisions to win the fight. I was making the decisions to have a fight, because the Anthony Johnson had bored the life out of me so much, and I really felt like I'd wronged the fans in some way, because I'd not given the performance that they wanted. And I had fans that had travelled from all over the US, from the UK as well, that had flown to Seattle.
Stars make fights, right? So if someone's not prepared to stand in front of you, then you can't do your thing.
But at the same time, as a mixed martial artist, it's my responsibility to create that fight as well. Like, I can't. And this was always a misconception when I never complained about wrestlers using wrestling to win fights. Like, I feel if I got taken down, it's my responsibility to get back up and get myself in a situation where I can win the fight. But at the same time, I don't think a wrestler should use wrestling to hide from the fight, which to a certain extent in that fight I felt like Anthony Johnson did. It was the easiest thing for him to do to win the fight, and he knew how close he was to losing his job, so he made the right decision. I'm still friends with him, we're still cool, but that was a decision that he made. Whereas with the Lytle fight, I wanted to fight. I just wanted to go in there and just feel that adrenaline.
But also a great opponent for you to do that as well.
And a great opponent, yeah.
He bangs. He's got great submissions, but he's not a big, heavy, middleweight posing as a welterweight.
No.
And you have nothing to lose. It's your fourth, so if it's a loss, you're gone.
And this was it. And I'd already okay, September I'm going to go back to university, and I had things I was planning, and then when Lorenzo tweeted and he said that they were keeping me. And then the backlash from that small cultish group of fans that demand fighters' heads on a spike when they lose too many fights. You know what I mean? I was like, wow, now I need to fight to prove Lorenzo made the right decision. This is not about me winning fights anymore. Now I'm kind of on borrowed time. And that was where I was at going into the Ludwig fight. Like, I'm on borrowed time. So if this works out, then great. And if it don't, all the plans that I've got in the pipeline just fall into place straight
Talk
after
about
that.
out of the box. Now you have all these other options.
If you like alternative history, which is what I do, then expect everything that you say to be turned over forensically, very, very closely, by large numbers of hostile academics.